What's going on, and welcome back to another episode of the Siobhan Speaks Social podcast. I wish that I could go live every day like I used to and cover some of these topics, but for my own nervous system, I pick and choose and am very selective about the topics that I want to go in on because I want to model for those that follow, and then for the rest of society, how we don't, everything doesn't require a response, a reaction. Some of these things that we're seeing are just simply patterns of the same thing happening over and over again. But before I get into it too much, what got me kind of startled up today were the topics of adoption, specifically like white people adopting black children. And then, same unusual, the facade of America. I made a TikTok and a reel on that. You can go check that out. It's about 3 minutes worth. I might touch on it here, but I pretty much summarize it all in that video. But I watched a video by Ebony Warrior Studios. He's one of my favorite creators over on Instagram. He's also on TikTok. He was showing a video where a white mother was talking. This is from 2023. And she was sharing how she fears that this education, this Black Lives Matter forum that the public schools are participating in, was teaching her daughter, I'm assuming she had an adopted black child, to hate her. I wanted to talk about this because I remember growing up and watching movies like Panther, which if you look at Rotten Tomatoes or look at the reviews for that time, it got really bad reviews. But for me, like, that was an insight into history to help me understand my father and what my father and my mother grew up in and the sort of environment and just the animosities and the stresses that they had to go through. Like, I thought growing up in my predominantly white schools was hard, and people always making fun of my hair, boys never thinking I'm pretty, or just random jokes that you just kind of got used to being like the butt of the joke, or people being afraid of you, or like just all kinds of you just kind of like being the fat kid in school. You get used to being the butt of a joke, except you can lose weight. When you're the black kid, you just kind of get used to being the butt of your friends' jokes when you're the only black kid around, unless you were raised by, parents that taught you otherwise. But even, and again, that's not even just a race thing, like kids in general, you learn to accept how your friends treat you because you want to be accepted. But then there's that added layer when it comes to your acceptance being based off of your own denial of yourself, which leads me to the lunacy of this mother's case for learning about black history and leading it to for her children to hate her. I will say, as a child, growing up and watching those movies, a part of me, I wasn't mad at my dad for making me watch stuff like Higher Learning or Time to Kill. And when I say make, I use that word loosely. Like, nobody made me watch anything. They just didn't, make sure that I wasn't. Hold on, my dog's out here. Luna, I see you getting hype, and you get too hyped during the show. You're going to knock something down. Go inside, baby. Go inside. I remember watching those shows, those movies, and being so mad at my friends when I would go back to school. Like, I would look at them differently, and I would want to lash out at them. I would want to, but I wouldn't know what to say. I had no idea what to say. And if you've been following me long enough, you know that one TikTok that popped off last summer, which kind of started my growth towards, ooh, we finally hit our 10K. But, and the only reason why I care about having the 10K followers, it used to be to go live and then they let everyone go live. But for me, this means having playlists so that I can organize all my rants and stuff, because I will do a part one of something knowing I didn't fully cover the topic, and part two may not come out till months later when I'm ready and hyped to talk about it, because doing the episode in itself was so emotionally draining. I know that I don't have time for it in the near future. So that's the only reason why I cared about having 10K. Anywho, the video that got me in front of a lot of more eyes was my rant that was like everything I was holding in as a child about growing up in these spaces, and but never really having the words to put it in, never having what, never being able to articulate those words. So it was really, it was beautiful, and a lot of it was very raw. And then some people in the comments called me out like, you're displacing your anger. And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm just expressing my anger. And a lot of it during that rant, I was talking to my friends that I grew up with, my high school, my elementary school friends, and people who had a friend like me growing up, So I don't think it was misplaced. I was talking exactly to who I felt harmed or ignored or not seen by. They just couldn't hold space for me having that kind of anger. And this isn't just something that happens with whites versus blacks. This is people in general that don't know how to hold space for themselves. You don't know how to hold space for other people's emotions because you're out of like, you don't have any practice with doing it yourself. So when I at the time when those people were responding, it was so frustrating because I'm like, you guys have no idea. Like, no, it is right for us to have these very real emotions and very real anger. So to the mom's statement or concern that it would cause her daughters to hate her, I don't know if it's going to cause them to hate you, because if you're not acting like that, then they're not going to have that. If you are actively being someone that is anti-racist, there's no way your daughters could grow up disliking you because they see that you're part of the solution and not part of the problem. I'm going to give you an example of what it means to be actively anti-racist. So remember when everyone wanted blue bracelets, which I don't, wait, it was blue bracelets, right? Was there a pen or something before that? Okay, so the performative, we need y'all to know that we're the good guys type thing. I want to break that down for you too, real quick. It's not that the bracelets were, oh my God, so performative as it was more, it is performative as fuck, but the intention is what makes it ugh. The intention is, I need you to know I'm not one of the bad guys, when that's not, like, we don't fucking care right now. We as a community are mourning, we're sad, we're angry. There's things like we just want to be in our safe spaces. And the last thing we're worried about is, who wants to look good in front of our faces. Like that's the last thing. Like, imagine you just buried someone and like, say you were in the mob. Crazy examples, first thing to come to my mind though. Imagine you were in the mob and somebody offed a family member of yours, and at the funeral, the only thing, instead of like sending their condolences or comforting you or holding space for you to be fucking sad and mourn your dead, there's just a bunch of people at the funeral that are like, yo, we're the good guys, we're the good guys, we didn't do it. And I'm like, great, fucking great. That doesn't undo what I went through. That doesn't fix my emotion. Can you just shut the fuck up for a moment? That's what the blue bracelets, that's what it sounded like. That's why we wanted y'all to just shut the fuck up with it. So for this mother who's worried that hearing about Black history and how people that look like her have treated people that look like her daughter, you wouldn't have to worry about that if you were actively anti-racist. So again, what does that look like? What does that mean? I've got neighbors. I live in a predominantly white neighborhood in a predominantly white city in Florida. Okay, it's much more diverse than other parts of my state. Let's not get crazy, but still. There are people in this neighborhood that are white, that are Hispanic, that are not Black, that I know are not racist, or at the very least they fuck with me, or at the very least they didn't vote my rights away. And you know how I can tell? Because they don't get all awkward when they walk by me. They don't feel the need to go out of their way to avoid eye contact with me, or they don't feel the need to assert their dominance and not move when I'm walking down the sidewalk, or not move when I'm in the gym. And just, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are people that don't feel the need to assert their dominance or avoid me. Those are the people that I know are not struggling internally with themselves or with me. And then you have my other neighbors who literally live downstairs from me, who can't look me in the eye, who pretend like I'm not there. We will literally wait around and like, if we pull up at the same time, one of us will fumble around to avoid that awkward contact. Well, not me so much anymore, but you know what I'm saying? Like, because like, I know you can feel that energy, even if it's not said, it is felt. It's not just in what you do, it's in what you don't do. You not trying to make eye contact with me and smile, it doesn't mean that you're racist, but I mean, I'm just saying, if I'm wondering who in this neighborhood left the shit in front of my door after the election, it's probably not one of these people that go out of their way to let me know, or it's probably not one of these people who feel comfortable saying hi to my neighbor. Like, you can tell when people are not from here because they'll move into the neighborhood and they will immediately, hey, how's it going? People that are from Florida or people that have, some issues about them, they don't do that. And it puts me in a weird space because I was that girl that wanted to always smile and wanted everyone to know I'm one of the good Black girls, or I don't even know. I wanted white acceptance or proximity to whiteness. I'm not even sure why I went out of my way to smile and make white people comfortable in my presence, but I don't do that anymore. I don't go out of my way to make them uncomfortable, but I'm also not making sure that I smile and that I'm gentle and that I do this and that I don't wear big hoop earrings and gold stuff or anything that makes them think I'm unprofessional, because I don't fucking care anymore. My, oh my, how we've gotten off track. Still on track. So again, with this mother who's worried about the history making it hate her daughters, if you are a good mother, a good person, an anti-racist person, that would never cross your mind. But the fact that you feel like you have to hide things from her in order, or them in order for them to like you, that's literally America. If you gotta hide parts of your history in order for people to like you, you're not being fucking real. If you got into a relationship with someone and they didn't tell you until months or years into their relationship, oh yeah, by the way, I'm a serial killer. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm a sex trafficker. You'd be like, what the fuck? And that's how America is. It's like, hey guys, come on over. Look how great it is. Look how pretty it is. We have social media. We have stores, grocery stores full of food. You can buy as much food. Nobody's gonna tell you how much you can't make. You can start a business. No one's gonna tell you how much money you can or can't make in your business. You can do whatever you want. I'm over here thinking of like, what's that place? Pleasure Island, right? Pinocchio. Like or is it Peter Pan? Either one. Okay, it was never. Where is it? Where were the Lost Boys at? You see what I'm going with this? Like they advertise this. You can do whatever you want, but yeah. Don't look at the negative side of why you get to do whatever you want. That's what would we call it? We call it false advertisement, right? You're omitting information. When other people do it, we're quick to call them out on it. But as a country, that's who we are, and we don't want to hear about it. And so what happens is what we're experiencing right now in this Pluto of Aquarius is a whole bunch of little tiny not incarnations so much as just examples, personifications, embodiments, examples of what our nation is in a smaller sense. My girlfriend talks about at her firm how like the way that they treat their employees, the energy, the dynamic is literally like America with its people, MAGA and everyone else. I talked about the church a lot. I talk about how when I was inside the church and telling them like, hey, what you guys are about to do or the direction you're going in or the silence that you're participating in, or did I'm like, that's not going to work out the way that you want. And then, I left the church, and then a few years later, what happened? George Floyd happened. The church had to apologize on like live TV about not being supportive of the Black community. Da, da, da. And then I don't know how they're doing now with MAGA being so popular. I can't imagine being a person of color in a church that was pro MAGA before, but not so loud. Anywho, we're watching on a smaller scale in your communities, in your church groups, in your, just in these smaller communities and businesses on a large scale, the big lesson that America is learning, and it's happening in the smaller ones. It's really cool, actually. It kind of reminds me of an Alien movie where, like, if you hit the mother lode, it starts to infect all the other little ones. And that's exactly what's happening. We're watching things crumble, which is for the later half of the episode. Let me get back to this whole adoption thing. So I've already talked about how if you are just a good, not racist person, you don't have to worry about people finding out what your people did and then hating you, because the only reason why you would be afraid of that is if you have some of those same tendencies, which a lot of people do, and we don't realize it. And it's a part of our colonization. Stuff like perfectionism, which I've talked about in the last episode. Stuff like, oh, there's a video. Ooh, good video by I'm gonna put his name in the here. It's like some Chu. I don't know. He's Gullah Geechee, and he's a linguist, and he's awesome. And I think he's from Florida. Anywho, it was a video where a girl was showing her lip, and she was talking about, oh, I'm about to get this infected thing taken out or whatever. And you just see people spamming her comments about tooken is crazy, it's taken, or it's took, or whatever, and everyone's just calling her out on her poor grammar. And he broke it down, and he was like, if this is all that you cared about, I want you to know you're not smarter than her. You've just been conditioned to point out the negative or the wrongs in people. And it's the same thing here. Like, we have just been conditioned. We've all been conditioned to have colonial type standards. And so if that woman was afraid that her children were going to see that and get mad at her, it's only because she's been conditioned to treat them the way that's going to match. Like, she's going to do like little connect the dots things and be like, Mom, you do that, you know what I'm saying? So message to anyone who's worried about coming across as racist. My friends that aren't racist don't ever have to worry about coming across as racist. There's some situations where they are over correcting themselves and but that's because they've had situations where people were like overreaching and being sensitive just because they can. And that does happen too. Yes, there are plenty of Black people who like to mess with white people just because they can. And I don't think that that's appropriate. However, there's a lot of things in this world that aren't appropriate. That's not where I'm going to spend my energy, because more often than not, those don't result in white deaths. Like black people playing around in the movie, what was it? I don't know, just like messing with the white person, like the token white person. Like that's more like community play. Nobody's dying from that. When we're the butt of the joke, we could end up being drugged behind a car or a truck or pushed over a boat on a girl's trip and nobody knows what happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, so just like be careful if that's where your brain immediately went to, because I want you to compare them and see if they are indeed comparable. Another thing about adoption, which is basically legalized trafficking, but another thing about the whole black adoption thing or the pro-life choose adoption thing that has always irked me is that I'm dating, my partner was adopted, and she was adopted into an all-white family of conservatives who most recently, yes, actively voted to limit, diminish, silence her voice and her rights. She grew up, she went to a private school. She had a pretty decent life from the outside looking in. And the stories, like if I had experiences being in a predominantly white space as a black person, her stories being in the school with the one percenters out here, I can't, like some of the trauma just from being the only black kid in space, like my trauma couldn't hold a candle to hers. Like my trauma came in a whole bunch of other different ways. Mine was just the normal. Hers was on some other stuff. And she didn't have a connection to her community or to people that look like her or any sense of like self and culture, and also not being connected to her birth parents. That can do a number on someone. It really can. Like, I always felt like I was cut off from my people by just not being able to go to schools with them and this and that. But I couldn't imagine growing up in a whole world where people don't look like you. And it's one thing if you do this, like you adopt a kid from Uganda or you adopt a kid wherever and you want to give them a better life. A better life doesn't mean cut off from their cultures and who they are, because we all need to have a deep sense of knowing of who we are, because if not, we will let the world tell us. And that is what has happened with so many of these black kids that people just adopt, and they don't have a strong sense of self, culture, or connection to their community or people that look like them. And that, the same sort of decolonization work and deconstruction work that white people have to do, we also have to do too, because we ate the same stuff. We drank the same Kool-Aid. It makes me, the whole adoption argument has always just irked me, because it's like no one's actually, like, they don't think about the consequences, like, okay, of taking a child that someone did not for whatever reason want or could not raise, and making them come into this world anyways, where as far as they're concerned nobody wants them. There's not a overwhelming amount of evidence just because of lack of data. But a lot of these homeless people are foster kids who aged out of the system. So the next time someone is so pro-life and they're talking about just give your baby up for adoption, tell them to do some research on where a lot of these kids end up, what happens to them if they don't have the good life, because a lot of these kids end up in fosters and group homes for people that just want them for checks and money, and then they abuse them, whether it's physically, whether it's sexually. There's just so much harm being created by this need to control someone else's life. And I'll finish with this. I didn't even know I was going to go in this direction. My grandmother, when I when they found out what had happened to me and that I had become pregnant, my grandma told me, pick a father for the child. Pick one of your abusers and pick a father. This sort of thing happened all the time to women. I didn't want to. I didn't want to. I would rather have raised the child myself. That was my hard choice that I wanted to make, but instead they made that one for me. So I got to raise my child with one of my abusers instead of just completely cutting them off. Because of course the cops encouraged me to not press charges. These are football boys, and I'm not. They're good boys. Anywho, they both ended up in jail for different reasons, and the same police departments, not the same ones, but the police that told me not to press charges because it would be a rough trial for me, ended up contacting me and asking me to corroborate their history of violence Anywho, flash forward, and the decision that my grandmother made for me was the wrong one. So I ended up, for the first few years of my son's life, raising him to think that an abuser was his father, and it wasn't even him. This is what happens when you seek to try to control other people's lives and you just mess it up even more. I wish for the life of me that more conservatives could understand that if you think you're voting a certain way to save someone's world or make it better, you are not. You are causing so much more harm in people's lives that didn't even have to happen. If you're doing it for your religious reasons, I want you to remember that even God was pro-choice. People have free will. People in the Bible had free will to have concubines, to slay people, to do wars and do craziness. But you're worried about whether someone who was impregnated against their own will should have to keep their own child or not. Or whether a drug-addicted mother should have to give birth to that child addicted to drugs and leave them in the world with no one that wants them. Things are so much deeper than just what we want them to be, and I really wish that we would take more time to indulge on these nuances. That would have been a really good place to end, but I did just want to make sure I went back and touched on that 3-minute video I was talking about today, which is basically the facade of America, which I talk about. And it actually ties well into that. The facade that we are a pro-life Christian nation when the whole time our country was built off of a genocide of Native Americans and the enslavement of African Americans. Every accusation is a confession. So if you're a conservative or a recovering conservative watching this, I want you to really consider that statement. How every war that has been waged against people that are center of left, people that are different than you, I want you to think about how every accusation thrown at them, when you put a mirror up to yourself or your faith or your values, what does it say about you? What are you projecting? What are you not dealing with that's easier to deal with by looking at the speck in someone else's eye while not worrying about your own plank? We have all been living a facade, and it's about time that we come to terms with that. This is Siobhan and Siobhan Speaks Social, and I hope you do check out some of those videos, and I would love to hear your feedback and what are your thoughts on some of the things that we talked about today. Until next time.